All living things are active, influenced by the flow of energy and the cycling of matter. With all the processes that come into play and the constantly changing conditions, life can be a real balancing act. But it's simply science, and it's called equilibrium. These people are pushing themselves to the limit, but their bodies are healthy. A whole variety of processes help them maintain their physiological balance. This balance is called equilibrium. In fact, every natural system strives for equilibrium in a constantly changing world, from osmosis and diffusion in single cells to the complex interplay of ecosystems. When it's necessary, we can even use technology to help out, whether it's purifying water or filtering blood. Living systems work hard to stay in shape, in equilibrium, and to maintain the balance of life. We're surrounded by examples of equilibrium.
For example, these water molecules are in equilibrium with each other. They spread out evenly inside the pool.
Chlorine is added to the water to kill bacteria. The chlorine molecules spread out evenly in equilibrium with the water molecules.
Science rules.
But how does equilibrium work in us? Well, in our cells, molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide are constantly diffusing to reach equilibrium. During cellular respiration, particularly during exercise, oxygen is consumed, so it's lower in concentration in the cells. The oxygen molecules diffuse from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, from our blood into our cells. At the same time, carbon dioxide builds up in our cells and diffuses out. This constant movement of gases in and out keeps our cells in a state of equilibrium.
All physical and chemical processes naturally move towards equilibrium. But equilibrium is affected by the input of energy. For example, the mechanical kinetic energy of stirring increases the rate of diffusion of these dye molecules. The water and dye reach a uniform distribution more quickly. Now let's see how diffusion is affected by thermal energy.
These test tubes are filled with gelatin. We'll use 3 drops of dye to fill the top of each one.
We know the dye will gradually diffuse through the gelatin. But what if we add thermal energy?
We'll use an incubator, set at 30 degrees Celsius for this tube.
And we can reduce the thermal energy by refrigerating this second tube.
We'll leave this third tube at room temperature, and we'll leave you to predict the outcome.
Let's check out how our dye diffused at different temperatures.
We can see the rate of diffusion was greatest at the highest temperature and least at the lowest.
The diffusion at room temperature is in between.
There's a direct relationship.
The rate of diffusion increases when the thermal energy increases.
With a rise in temperature.
Boy, am I hot. How does my body temperature stay balanced?
Well, remember, cells consist mostly of water, and water has a high specific heat capacity.
It takes a lot of heat to raise the temperature of water.
Exactly. Water is a built-in control that prevents large temperature changes in cells and tissues. It maintains the temperature range at which your body functions best.
Keeping the balance, maintaining the body's equilibrium.
So what happens to a person's body during extreme temperature conditions, such as extreme heat or extreme cold?
Well, in the extreme cold, you're losing a lot of heat to the environment. So in order to balance heat production and the heat loss, you need to conserve the heat. So to conserve heat, you need to vasoconstrict and change the posture, curl into a ball, and increase your metabolism. So by doing all of this, you can keep your body temperature constant. Now, in extreme heat, on the other hand, is totally different because you are now gaining heat from the environment. You want to lose the heat from within. So sweating is one way we do lose a lot of heat. So under extreme conditions, the regulation of body temperature is very important.
So should people who are involved in outdoor activities and sports be worried about regulating body temperature?
Yes, very much so. In the cold, of course, you want to conserve your heat. So you don't want to become hypothermic. So the proper insulation is very important. But you don't want to be over-insulating. You don't want to start to sweat when you exercise. Nothing's worse than being wet in the cold because you lose a lot more heat. Now, in the heat, on the other hand, the problem is to make sure you can sweat continually and to lose the heat you generate both from the environment and also from within your exercise. So hydration is very important. Drink lots of fluid so you can sweat. If you don't, your blood gets thickened, more viscous, and your temperature starts to rise. You'll get a heat stroke.
Equilibrium is the most balanced and stable condition that can be reached between interacting processes. To stay alive, all organisms move towards and then maintain equilibrium. Imagine this as a single cell.
It is like a cell in a fluid environment, just like in our bodies.
Ideally, the solution outside the cell has the same concentration of dissolved molecules or solutes as inside. The solutions are called isotonic.
Iso means equal, and tonic?
It stands for concentration. In isotonic conditions, the movement of water into the cell is balanced by the movement of water out of the cell. The cell is in equilibrium with its environment.
But what if the solutions inside and outside the cell are not isotonic?
The cytoplasm in the root hair cells of this plant have a higher concentration of dissolved molecules than the water in the soil around them. So the solution in the root hair cells is called hypertonic because it has a higher or hyper concentration of solutes and fewer water molecules. On the other hand, the soil water is hypotonic because it has a lower or hypo concentration of dissolved molecules and more water molecules. By osmosis, water molecules move from the hypotonic solution in the soil into the hypertonic solution in the root cells. The solutions try to balance their concentrations of solutes and water.
But this is salt water. What if we add it to the soil of this plant?
You'll increase the concentration of dissolved molecules, in this case salt, in the soil water.
The soil water is now hypertonic compared to the plant cells. And look what happens.
By osmosis, the water follows its concentration gradient out of the plant cells, through its roots, and into the soil. The cells shrink, and the plant wilts.
In normal conditions, the cytoplasm inside a plant cell exerts a force called turgor pressure against the cell walls. This gives the plant support and rigidity. Plant cells in a hypertonic environment lose water due to osmosis. The cytoplasm shrinks away from the cell walls. It's called plasmolysis. The loss of pressure against the sides of the cell walls causes the plant to wilt.
Now, can we reverse the effects of plasmolysis?
If we put water back into the soil, it'll return to its hypotonic state, making the soil water less concentrated.
By osmosis, water will move back into the plant cells and help restore turgor pressure to support the plant.
It's called deplasmolysis.
But don't leave it too late.
So cells that are placed in hypertonic solutions or hypotonic solutions are not at equilibrium. But water always moves towards equilibrium by osmosis, creating equal concentrations or isotonic solutions.
A cell is an open system. Energy and matter cross the membrane into a cell and also leave the cell back out into the environment. Energy and matter flow into living cells, while cell products, energy and waste materials, flow back out. This interaction is carefully balanced to maintain equilibrium, so that cells and whole organisms can function normally. And because cells are constantly balancing, adapting to continuous changes, their activity is called dynamic. They are maintaining dynamic equilibrium.
Science rules.
Cells exchange energy and matter with their surroundings by diffusion and osmosis through a semi-permeable membrane, like this rubber tubing. Just get rid of the excess.
This is semi-permeable?
Right, just like a cell. Now we'll fill your tubing with this starch solution using a pipette.
Oh, it's slippery.
Yeah, you have to be careful.
Got it?
There we go. Okay there.
And we'll fill your tubing with the sugar solution.
Okay.
Can you hold this for me?
Sure, I'll seal it for you. That's it.
Got it.
Good. Now we can weigh them carefully and record their masses.
Thanks. The starch solution is 31.62 grams.
The sugar solution is 23.21 grams.
So, what's next?
We put the tubes into this distilled water and wait for evidence of osmosis and diffusion.
Right.
In they go, and off we go to wait.
Wait? For what?
Basically, what happens when you go into renal failure or kidney failure is your kidneys shut down. To put it very simply, your kidneys are like an oil filter. They filter out all the toxins and all the poison substances that are in your body.
This is a hemodialysis machine. It basically acts as your kidneys. This filter here, this dialyzer as we call it, is the kidney. The blood comes out of your chest or your arm and comes from your heart and your jugular and goes through the machine and is pushed with the pump through this dialyzer, which has tiny cells about the thickness of my pinky nail.
The membrane is what we call a semi-permeable membrane, which allows molecules and ions to pass through, and this is where the electrolyte exchange takes place. While the blood is being forced down through the dialyzer, the dialysate bath is going in the reverse flow. So through the membrane, what happens is it allows the electrolytes that we have mixed for this patient in a special bath to go to the patient if it needs it, or to pull it, and it's discarded out and just goes down a sewer line at the back.
So, what are your observations?
The starch solution gained mass, and the starch has settled to the bottom. None of it moved out.
You can verify that no starch moved out by adding iodine. First, a few drops to the starch solution.
It's turning blue-black.
Indicating the presence of starch. But a few drops to the distilled water remain yellow.
Meaning no starch is present.
Right. The starch molecules are too large to pass through the membrane.
So water molecules must have moved into the tube by osmosis to balance the concentrations.
Right. So how about the sugar solution?
It's actually lighter. Something moved out.
Let's test the water with this glucose indicator.
It's turning purple.
That's a positive test for glucose.
So the sugar molecules must have diffused out,
Right, because they're small enough to pass through the membrane.
which means the membrane is permeable to both sugar and water molecules.
But not to the larger molecules of starch.
Right, it's semi-permeable. Semi-permeable membranes help maintain a body's equilibrium, and we can use that knowledge to help save lives, as we've seen with hemodialysis.
This cycle's a real workout.
Well, and just imagine how your cells feel. They're cycling all the time,
Of course, cycling matter.
converting nutrients into usable forms of energy.
Energy that helps me cycle.
Our daily lives are full of energy conversions. Electric energy is converted to thermal energy, or to light energy, or to mechanical energy. The chemical potential energy in a match head converts to thermal and light energy, and the chemical potential energy in food is converted into chemical energy for the cellular metabolism that keeps us living.
You call this living?
You could call it metabolism.
What would that change?
Actually, metabolism is a Greek word that means change. The changes that occur in every cell,
Changes in matter and energy.
from one form to another. All activities in your cells require conversions of matter and energy. They all contribute to your metabolism.
Even when I stop cycling, my cells don't.
But your metabolic rate will decrease. Your energy requirements aren't as great when you're resting.
So as I slow down, so does my rate of metabolism.
That's right.
Science rules.
Why would evaluating metabolic rate be beneficial?
Well, metabolic rate tells us where the energy is coming from. And for an endurance athlete, it's very important to know how much oxygen is being used and the balance between aerobic and anaerobic energy supplied during different intensities of exercise.
So assessing metabolic rate is really important for top athletes.
Very much so. If we have an endurance athlete, we need to look at primarily aerobic metabolism. And as I said before, the balance of aerobic and anaerobic metabolism at given work rates, particularly around their race pace. If we have an anaerobic athlete who's interested in more high power and high intensity exercise, then we would be more interested in looking at anaerobic energy production. But either way, metabolic rate is very important.
There are ideal conditions under which cells and organisms metabolize, but these ideal conditions are rarely possible because the environment, external conditions, are always changing. Temperature, energy supply, and energy demand constantly fluctuate.
So how does the body adjust?
Your body has a way of regulating these variations around them to keep in balance. The term is homeostasis, and it means similar to standing still. Homeostasis is how the body maintains internal stability or balance through constant adjustment to external changes.
Like a feedback system.
Right. In our cells, the nucleus monitors information and coordinates the appropriate response. It controls metabolic activity.
For instance?
Well, if the nutrient supply is running low, the cell will cut back on using nutrients. Its rate of synthesizing new materials will slow down. Or, if there's an increased demand for energy, say for movement,
then cellular respiration will increase, converting energy in the muscles.
Individual cells and whole organisms need to maintain homeostasis in order to survive.
In animals, the brain coordinates homeostasis.
For example, perspiration is the body's reaction to overheating. As the sweat evaporates, it cools the body. Shivering is the opposite response. When a body becomes too cool, rapid muscle contractions generate heat. During exercise, heart rate increases to deliver more oxygen to the muscle cells to convert energy. Homeostasis keeps our bodies in balance.
Birds and mammals have to maintain a constant core temperature, a stable internal environment for cells and organs to function normally. So we bundle up or fluff up when it's cold and peel off the layers of insulation when it warms up to help regulate our internal body temperature.
Any living thing that's in balance with its environment is in dynamic equilibrium.
Like the cells that make up my organs.
And your organ systems with each other.
And all of me with my environment.
Even whole populations. All living things are open systems, exchanging matter and energy in dynamic equilibrium. Entire ecosystems are balanced by dynamic equilibrium. Solar energy enters an ecosystem through producing organisms, photosynthesizing plants, that convert that energy to carbohydrates. The energy is passed on, in food, to consumers and decomposers. Most of the energy is given off as heat, but with constant input from the sun, equilibrium is maintained. Matter is the raw material that cycles through an ecosystem to sustain and build new life. Our planet is a closed system. It doesn't exchange matter with its surroundings, but it does exchange energy.
Energy from the sun. But if the planet is a closed system, what about life on the planet?
All living things within Earth's biosphere are open systems. We exchange matter and energy and have checks and balances that allow us to function normally within our environments, to live in dynamic equilibrium.
And our bodies are constantly adapting to small changes. That's homeostasis.
But when conditions inside our internal or external environments change radically beyond usual range, then artificial means of support are required to maintain equilibrium.
I've been on hemodialysis for almost 6 years now. There's some things I can't do, like I can't do physical contact sports because of the catheter in my chest, and I spend a lot of time in the hospital, and I have to have lots of surgeries, and it takes up basically 3 times a week, 3 nights a week. So those are 3 nights a week I can't visit my friends, and sometimes I fall behind in school, and I can't participate in gym. And it's okay though, because I've had it my whole life. It's not like I have anything different.
Life in the space shuttle puts astronauts in a completely foreign environment. The capsule exchanges no matter or energy with the outside. It's called an isolated system. To maintain homeostasis, life support systems must be supplied artificially, from food, water, and oxygen to controls for temperature and air pressure.
Living systems are designed to exchange matter and energy with the environment. From the interaction between cells to the interdependence of organisms, we're all open systems in dynamic equilibrium.
Yo, let's rap.
When a variety of processes are affecting or interacting with a living system, the system will try to stabilize and balance them. It will try to reach equilibrium. In our bodies, or in the biosphere, every component must be in equilibrium with every other component in order to function normally. The ability of the system to adjust and adapt without disrupting the overall balance is dynamic equilibrium. And in our bodies, this dynamic balancing act is called homeostasis. Cells and organ systems remain internally stable even if the outside environment is changing. Life on Earth proceeds at a steady pace, adapting to change and always keeping balance. It's equilibrium, and it's simply science.